All right, guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today, we're going to be doing a tier list of the draft picks in the first round that we saw last night. We had a big draft overall, a lot of surprises, a lot of players that went high, a lot of players that dropped. So we're just going to get into this. We have a few tiers. We have the A plus tier, the A tier, the B tier, C tier, D tier, and F tier. And we're going to be ranking these two. So within the A tier, we'll have ones like A minus, and then the same thing for the B tier. We'll have B plus, B, C, or B minus, and then we'll rank each one. And then at the end, we'll just kind of overall talk about it. And these are just initial rankings. Obviously, we don't know how the players are going to work out, but just based on our big boards and how we felt about the players. So first off, I had the Panthers. I had them. I think Bryce Young was an A pick for me. I know a lot of people were saying it's more around a B plus, but if you're the Panthers and you're going for the quarterback, you took the best quarterback in this draft. And I don't think there's any way that this isn't an A pick to me just because they got their guy.
Yeah, and I agree. If you trade up some number one pick, you got to go get your guy. It seems like it's been Bryce Young in the whole process, despite what we may have thought. So yeah, I had him as an A pick. I think, you have to trade up and get your guy at some point, and hopefully Bryce Young is that guy for Carolina.
Okay, so next we have CJ Stroud for the Texans. And for me, I personally, I thought the Texans in this spot were going to take Will Anderson, and coming up to this, we kind of all had Will Anderson at 2. I have this pick as a B plus pick just because I think they still got their guy at quarterback, but I do think they could have gone with Will Anderson, and depending on how this board fell, we could have definitely seen them get a quarterback later at 12.
Yeah, I had them in that same range, somewhere in the B tier. They obviously made their way around the board, moving up to 3, which we didn't see coming until maybe right before the draft or maybe at all. But CJ Stroud, there's some risks about him, and then there's some solidified factors. I think he'll be ready to start day one. I think he's going to compete with Davis Mills, and I could see him winning that job pretty easily. But I don't think he's as good of a prospect as Bryce Young. So getting him at 2 puts him in that B range for me.
And the Texans trade back up to 3 and get Will Anderson. I have this as an A pick. I think they did obviously trade a lot to go back up and get him, but they had the 12th pick. So it's not like they ended up trading their whole entire future away. And they're doing it to get the best player in the draft. So I can't be too mad about this pick.
Yeah, we're on the same page so far. I think they moved up to 3 and they didn't have to give up too much. Obviously, it's a bit of a risk, but you walk out of this draft with CJ Stroud and Will Anderson, I don't think you can complain.
Yeah. And I think we can keep this one behind Bryce Young just because of trading back up into it. I think that's pretty
Yeah.
agreeable. Next, we have Anthony Richardson here, and I have this as an A minus pick. I think the only issues, was my 3rd quarterback in this draft, and I think the Colts ended up getting their guy at 4, and they didn't have to move around the board at all. And I think it's a better pick for them than the CJ Stroud was for the Texans.
Yeah, I had him as more of a B plus, but I think I can agree with you there. As you guys know, Anthony Richardson is my favorite prospect out of any quarterback this year, out of pretty much any prospect this year. I just don't love the Indianapolis fit, but if you're in Indianapolis, you go out, you get a quarterback you think you can mold. As a fan of Anthony Richardson, I'm a little nervous about it, but I think it's a good pick. I think we're on the same page again.
So next we have Devin Witherspoon for the Seahawks. At first, I wasn't really sure how I felt about this pick just because I thought they had other needs, but they go with a cornerback to kind of duel up in that backfield on defense. And I have this as an A pick. I thought it was a great pick overall, the best corner in the draft and one of the best defensive players in the draft at 5.
Yeah, I had him more in that B range, but I agree with everything you said. I think I was just surprised to see him go at 5. I think he's talented enough and it makes sense. But, Seattle, they do have the need at corner. I do think it's a good pick. So I would put it in that high B tier, low A tier as well. I think Devin Witherspoon is a great prospect. It's just maybe you could have attacked something differently. Look at a guy like Jalen Carter, but, it definitely wasn't a bad pick by any means.
So do you think we should move Anthony Richardson down to the B tier above CJ Stroud and then keep Witherspoon at the A tier, like right behind Will Anderson? I'm trying to think.
I think the Anthony Richardson pick was a better pick than the Devon Witherspoon one, but I think they were very close.
Okay.
Like I'd put them like next to each other in whatever tier.
Okay. Next we have Paris Johnson at 6 to the Cardinals, and they ended up trading down, but trading back up. So kind of overall, not really much happened. I had this as an A pick. I think this was a fantastic pick. They ended up trading down. Obviously they traded back up into it, but they still ended up getting assets from this, and they get one of the best players in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, this was an A pick for me as well. They clearly wanted their guy. Being able to get some later picks in return for this when they would have taken him at 3 anyways, it's got to be an A for me. I really liked it.
And next we have Tyree Wilson going to the Raiders. This is an A- pick. I think there is some concerns about his injury, his foot injury, but he's one of the best edge rushers in this draft. And I think the Raiders addressed a need, and putting him on that line is going to help them tremendously.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm a big fan of Tyree Wilson. Obviously, his injury is a bit of an issue. I didn't expect him to go to the Raiders, but I think he'll fit right in. The Raiders have had kind of issues with their edge rushers in the draft recently. They're one of those teams that finds value a little more later. You look at a guy like Max Crosby, but I think Tyree Wilson can really be that guy. So I'm in that A- range as well.
And next up, we have Bijan Robinson. This is an interesting pick. I had him as a C+ pick. I think that he's a great player overall for this team, and I mocked him to go there. And I know there's a lot of people saying that he's in the D tier, but he's a player that is one of the best offensively and just overall in this draft. And I think they'll be able to get a lot out of him. I'm not sure if they necessarily needed him, but they are the heaviest run team in this draft. So I understand why they're going with the pick. And that's why I had him more as a C+ tier, just because I don't think that it's not like my D tier for me is guys that shouldn't have gone in the first round. And I think Bijan definitely deserved to be in the first round.
Yeah, I was in a B- C+ range. We can knock him to the C+ for all the reasons you brought up. He just is an incredible prospect. I know he will succeed in Atlanta, but just realistically, we know how running back value works now. Is he even going to be a guy that gets a second contract with this team? We'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, I can rock with C+ there, B-. Like, I agree with you. I don't think it's a D tier pick. He's too good of a prospect to put him that low.
And then next up, we have Jalen Carter. This is my first A+ grade of the draft. The Eagles end up getting arguably the best player in the draft at 9. And I know they made a lot about his off the field issues, but he's going in there. He's going to be in a system with pretty much his whole entire Georgia championship defense at this point. And he is going to be an amazing player on that line. And for the Eagles to get him at 9 is absolutely insane to me.
Yeah, I mean, once he started falling, we knew it would be, some team would get a steal. It happened to be the Eagles who could have really used him. This is I think, the best pick of the whole draft. I think this was an absolutely incredible value. You worry about stuff off the field, but you can't judge off the field when you don't know the player. And we don't know the player. We know him as Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle. And as Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle, he would have gotten number 1 a couple months ago. He's uber talented. He fits the system well. Philly always gets a lot of production out of their D tackles. You see Fletcher Cox. You see early signs of Jordan Davis. I think Jalen Carter will be incredible. And I think Philly fans are loving this draft in general. So, yeah, I put him in A+.
And then next we have the 10th pick of the draft. We have the Bears with Darnell Wright. I had this as a B- pick just because I think there was better players on the board at that position available, and also trading down from that 9 pick with the Eagles, they could have had Jalen Carter. So, but I do understand that this is their guy at O tackle, and I think he's definitely, we talked about this all the time, he's definitely a first round tackle. I just think there is better players at the position available.
Yeah, I had this in a C+, B- range. I'm a big fan of Darnell Wright. We talked about it in our prospects video. I think he'll be really good at right tackle, left tackle, whoever they move over. He'll be really solid on that Bears line. With that being said, you mentioned seeing Jalen Carter and passing up on him. We mocked him to go number 1 to the Bears when they still had that pick. So it seemed a little weird. It seemed like they kind of were expecting to maybe get a guy like Paris Johnson and kind of settled. With that being said, I think he's going to be amazing on that line. So you got to put it in a bit of a weird range. I like B-, C+, something there.
Yeah, I bumped him down to the C+ tier area. because I don't think he's really in that same area as Devin Witherspoon, Anthony Richardson, and CJ Stroud at B, but we can go over it later too.
Yeah.
Peter Skoronski next up for the Titans. I have this as an A tier pick. I think with seeing Darnell Wright go right in front of them, and they get Peter Skoronski, who will be a great player for them. He'll probably end up being a guard, which isn't bad. I know there's some people that might have issues with that, but they drafted an offensive lineman at the end of the day. They didn't go out there and draft a pure tackle, and they knew this. And this was a great pick for them, especially seeing Wright going before them. And obviously, we'll end up seeing some tackles go later too.
Yeah, for the Titans, I was impressed. I give it an A. Peter Skoronski's kind of weird. I'm with you on the idea that maybe he's not the best tackle, but he will profile as a really good guard. Either way, the Titans O-line is horrible. You got to figure out quarterback at some point, but Will Levis wasn't the answer. I'm impressed that they did not go that route and instead building up an offensive line for maybe Malik Willis to come in or whatever they figure out in the future. It's the smart move. I respect it. It's in a lower A tier for me. It's a good pick.
So next up, we have one of the most interesting picks. I guess probably the most interesting pick as of right now in the draft. We have Jahmyr Gibbs going to the Lions at 12. And I'm just going to say at first, I have this as a D pick. I think that all my D picks were guys that I probably weren't supposed to go in the first round. Jahmyr Gibbs was definitely getting a lot of looks in the first round. I think if the Lions didn't get him, someone would have drafted him between 26 and 31. Obviously, we didn't see that because he got drafted here. So I can't be too mad at the Lions. And I know they have now 3 running backs, but it seems like they're going to be moving on from DeAndre Swift. And I know that it's this more of a looking forward pick, but in my mind, I can't really have this as an F pick, as he's going to make a big splash, especially on the offense, and he's going to be able to be a great pass catcher. And it's not like he's a 3rd round guy. I think he was a borderline 1st round guy. I think they just reached on him a little bit.
Yeah, it's a D pick for me. I like it a little more than I did right when it happened. For the same reasons, it's pretty clear they're going to move on from Swift. With that being said, I talked about him. He's not a prospect I like. I don't think he's going to be as valuable as they may think in the running game. I'm excited to see what they do with him as a receiver in the passing game. That's one of his strengths, in my opinion. So, I mean, we saw his drop last year against Tennessee, which, got them a win over Alabama. That was nice. But aside from moments like that, he's solid in the passing game. He can pass block. Can catch. I think he's going to stretch the field. I mean, a comparison I saw is what the Rams do with I don't even know how to pronounce his last name, but Ben, the white receiver that they have in the backfield, how they have him doing full stretch routes out of the backfield. Something like that for Jahmyr Gibbs would be interesting. But just based off the prospect and how they got him at 12, when they probably could have looked more late in the first round, I got to put him at D.
Yeah, and this kind of reminds me of the same area when the Giants drafted Daniel Jones. People talked about this might be high, and I know they're getting their guy, and he might have fell later, but we don't really know what would have happened. I mean, there could be guys breathing down their neck if Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't get drafted here. There could be teams that draft him like immediately after. We just don't really know what happens in this scenario. So that's why I think we both have him as a D instead of the F, but a lot of people were thinking F right when he got drafted. Next up, we have the Packers at 13, and they go with Lucas Van Ness. I think a little bit of an interesting pick. I didn't really expect the Packers to go in this direction, but it's very clear that they hate drafting offensive players. I have this as a B- pick. I think they had a little more need at different positions, especially offensively, but Lucas Van Ness, one of the best edge rushers in this draft. So they're still getting a great player, but I think they could have gone in a different direction.
I'm going to argue to bring it into the C tier, not necessarily because I dislike Lucas Van Ness. I agree with you. I think he's one of the better edge rushers in this class. With that being said, it was fine for the Packers to not address offense in the draft when they had Aaron Rodgers. And I say fine very loosely because I think it cost them some valuable playoff games, if I'm being honest, not having enough weapons. But with Jordan Love coming in and a whole new offense, surrounding him, you need to get something. I don't care if it's a receiver. I don't care if it's an alignment. I don't care if it's a tight end at this point. You got to give them something to work with. And going after another edge rusher once again, when of course it's a need, but they're already solid enough at the positions. I like Lucas Van Ness as a player. I think he will be good in Green Bay. I think you would have had to go with another position. So he's in that C range for me. I could say C plus because I like him as a prospect.
Yeah, I put him right behind Darnell Wright. I feel like that's both of those guys are kind of in the same area for me.
Yeah.
Next up, we have the Steelers going with Broderick Jones at what is this, pick 14. I had them with a B plus pick at this point. I think being able to protect their quarterback of the future at this point, I don't really have much to say on this. I think Broderick Jones was the best tackle available, and they got a great player in this pick.
Yeah, they traded up a couple picks. They knew they wanted this guy. He's a great blocker. I mean, he fills up a big hole on the edge of the offensive line. He was very solid in college. Yeah, I'm not going to keep rambling on. I have him in the same range. Very good player.
And next up, we have the Jets going with Will McDonald, a interesting pick to say the least. I have this as a D pick. I said my D picks were players who I don't think were worthy of getting drafted in the first round, and I don't think Will McDonald should have been drafted at 15. I could see maybe towards the very end of the first round, but I think the Jets had so many better options at this point. You had guys like Kalijah Kancey still on the board. I mean, any of the receivers too, if you really want to bolster up that offense for Aaron Rodgers. You had cornerbacks left on the board. You had Maisie Smith, who would get drafted later, Miles Murphy, Brian Brzee, Nolan Smith, all guys I would take before Will McDonald.
Yeah, and I want to preface this by saying I actually do like Will McDonald. I'm a little higher on him than I know you are, that I know a lot of people are. I think he's good, but spending a 15th overall pick on an old edge rusher who, if we're being honest, didn't go up against a ton of talent offensive line wise in college, it seems like a little bit of a reach. I would definitely call it a reach. I think as a prospect, he could go out there and perform. I don't think he's going to be a bad player, but it's got to be a D just because, I mean, I know you never really know. We're not in these draft rooms, but just from a consensus outsider look, it feels too early. It seems like they could have got him. I was expecting him to go like maybe where the Chiefs picked at 31 if he was going to sneak into the first round, not top 15 with those big name guys that you mentioned still on the board.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would have seen the Chiefs probably take a guy like him, but we did see them take a defensive player later. Next up, we have the Commanders taking Emmanuel Forbes. I have this as a C pick. I think there was obviously better cornerbacks available at this point, but I think Emmanuel Forbes is still a good player, and I think he was I don't have him in the D tier because I think that he's a first round guy overall, and I don't hate them with that pick. I just think there was better guys available, just like how I have him in that same area as the Darnell Wright pick. I think there were still guys better, but the team got the guy that they were looking for.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Forbes fits well with their system. So it's not a bad pick just based on that alone. I think we both acknowledge that he's going to perform well in the NFL and he has room to develop. So I really like that about him as a player. But the two of my top three corners are still on the board at this spot. It feels like I can't really give him a whole lot of credit for taking my fourth favorite corner as the second one off the board.
Yeah. And speaking of corner, next up, we have the New England Patriots who take Christian Gonzalez. And I have this pick as my second A+ pick of the draft, especially seeing Emmanuel Forbes go right in front of them. And I think this is a great pick for the Patriots. I was surprised that they went with the cornerback route, but looking more into it, it's going to help bolster up that defense. And personally, he was my third best corner in the draft, and Joey Porter was still available at this point, but we didn't see Joey Porter get drafted, so I'm not sure what's going on with him. But the Patriots get a great pick here.
Yeah, it made me incredibly happy. The Patriots have a thing every year for trading down and making me upset. They drafted my favorite corner of the whole draft. With that being said, I won't necessarily pencil him as an A+ personally. I think it's a very high A. I would put him, in that Bryce Young, Will Anderson range just because the value is so good. But, you can call it either way you want. If you want to put him in an A+, I'll be happy with that. As a fan, I think he fits the system really well. But yeah, it's like a high A range for me. I think he's athletic. I think he fits the mold of taller cornerback that Bill Belichick likes. He's athletic. I'm just very happy overall. I guess that's my consensus on this.
So to completely flip the draft, we go from an A+ pick in Christian Gonzalez to Jack Campbell to the Lions. I have this as an F pick. I thought he was the third best linebacker in this draft, And if I'm being honest, I don't even think he should have been even close to anywhere near the first round. I know there were some people talking about him being in the first round leading up to this draft, but I just don't really love him as a prospect. And I think this was the worst pick in the first round by a mile. I don't think he should have even been close, especially this high in the first round before even pick 20.
Yeah, I'm a big middle linebacker guy, so I have strong opinions on this. He was my second middle linebacker in the draft. So, like, value wise, sure, whatever. But positional value doesn't do it for me. I don't think the Lions are in a position where they should be taking a middle linebacker so early. I know it's a need for them, but it's a need that can be addressed later. If we're talking about the value between getting Jack Campbell at 18 or getting a guy like Trent Simpson at 40-ish, they're almost just as good as each other. So it feels like kind of a waste of a pick. I know Dan Campbell really likes his guys, so he's willing to take them whenever. That goes for their GM as well. It's kind of been this way under the new regimen, but it's got to be an F. He's just not good enough as a player to be picked here, even though I think he could perform in the defense very well. He just, you could have got someone comparable a lot later.
Yeah. Next up, we have the Bucks going with Calijah Kancey. I have this as a low A pick. I think he was one of the best defensive line players in this draft, and being able to get him at 19, he's going to fit on that defense very well, and being able to put in that system, he's going to work out very well for them.
Yeah, we've been on the same page so far. I have him at low A range as well. I know there's worries about him being a little skinny. He gets the Aaron Donald comparison, but Aaron Donald's a freak of nature, and Calijah Kancey is on the skinnier side for a D tackle. That aside, we know he performs on the field. We know he's a top tier player, and I like him there. I think a lot of people had a guy like Brzee here. I think if you get to pick Kancey over Brzee, you're happy. So I like Tampa Bay's selection here. I put it in a low A as well.
And next up, we have Seattle going with Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I had this as a B pick. He wasn't my number one receiver, so that's why I kind of have him here. And we'll see all the receivers actually go after this in the next 4 picks. And I think for them getting the third best receiver on my big board, that's kind of why I have them as a B. I think he'll be able to fit into the system well, but I think they could have benefited more. I mean, if you have a guy like DK Metcalf and a guy like Quentin Johnston next to each other, or even Zay Flowers, I think would have been a better pick for them. But I don't hate the pick overall.
Yeah, we talked about in our mock draft how we thought Seattle would go after a slot guy. I think we both said Zay Flowers, but Jaxon Smith-Njigba is that slot guy. So based on the positional fit, I really like it. I'm a fan of his as a receiver. I worry about the injuries a little bit, but I think he'll be all right. So, I mean, just based off the fit, based off, the player we're getting, and based off how I think Pete Carroll in that system will be able to use him correctly, I think it's going to open up a lot more for Lockett and DK. I got him in that B range as well, lower B.
So next up, we have the Chargers going with Quentin Johnston here. And I have this also as a B pick. I think for the Chargers, they needed a wide receiver, but I think they could have benefited more with a guy like Zay Flowers or even Jordan Addison. I don't really like the fit with Quentin Johnston with the receivers that they already have, especially just because they pretty much all profile as large receivers. So I think they could have used a slot guy, but I can't knock this any lower than a low B just because they needed a receiver and got one.
Yeah, and I'll give some defense. I mean, clearly the Chargers have a very, they have a thing for the tall wide receivers that can high point a football. That's all the receivers on their team at this point. With that being said, I'm in agreement. It's a B. It's in that mid to low B range. I really like Quentin Johnston. I know he was your number one receiver. He's up in that range for me. There's a little bit I worry about, but I mean, you can't deny that having Allen, Williams, and now Johnston is going to be tough for cornerbacks to guard, especially as we see a lot of small corners kind of make a wave in the NFL. It's like we're playing reverse small ball in basketball. It's like if you run out there with 3 centers. It's interesting, at least.
Yeah, and I understand where they're going here too, just because their other receivers that are also very big have a lot of injury concerns. So they could be looking towards the future too with that pick. So next up, we have the Ravens going with Zay Flowers, and I have this as an A+ pick. I think being able to get him after Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Quentin Johnston when he was borderline my first receiver, he was very close with Quentin Johnston, and the fit, he's going to seamlessly fit into this offense, having him out there with Odell too. I think this is from both sides, getting him as the third receiver in the draft and just the fit on the team is just absolutely amazing for them.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. This is the first part of the video where we're really going to disagree. I like Zay Flowers a lot. I'm definitely not putting him any lower than B, but I was kind of leaning towards the B range. I'm a big fan of his. I understand. I actually don't love him in the system as much. I know Lamar benefits from, fast receivers on shorter routes. That's where his, that short to intermediate arm talent is a strength of Lamar Jackson's. And, his creativity outside of the pocket allows for faster receivers to be more valuable. But I just think it's a good pick for the range. I don't think it's necessarily enough of a steal or unexpected to really be in the A plus tier for me. I like him enough as a prospect where I would be willing to put him in the A tier, no problem. But I'm surprised at A plus. I definitely wouldn't have put him there.
I think for me, just being able to fit on the team too, I don't think an A plus is necessarily a steal, but I think if he fits into the system and just overall the pick works out for the team, I think that's kind of where my A plus tier is.
Yeah, and I understand. But then I look at a guy like Will Anderson in the A tier, and I think it would be similar there. I think you get a guy at the value they were expected, and they fit your team seamlessly. I have no knock on Zay Flowers. I think he's going to be a star, but I think that's where I would put that. I see Jalen Carter and Christian Gonzalez in the A plus tier. Like, these are guys that teams got immense value that we never would have expected. I think Zay Flowers was in the right spot, and I think he's going to be great. But he's like A to me. I maybe B was too low, so I would definitely say A.
I got him in between Will Anderson and Paris Johnson as of right now on the tier list.
That's fair to me.
So next up we have the Vikings going with Jordan Addison and needing a receiver, I guess, after losing Adam Thielen. I have this as a low A pick, but looking at this, I might have it more towards that B area. I think it would be right behind Devin Witherspoon. Personally, for me, I had Jordan Addison as my either the third or the fourth best receiver, depending on the team fit, especially with him and Jackson Smith and Jigba. But I do think this is a good pick, kind of more towards that area of the Quentin Johnson and Jackson Smith and Jigba pick.
Yeah, I kind of had him penciled into that same range you just put him. But yeah, I think it's important to have, these subsidiary receivers with a star receiver like Jefferson. We saw Thielen up until last year be incredibly effective. He was already a really good guy. And I think Addison fits that mold, kind of. Obviously, he's a bit shorter. He does different things. But, I mean, with that being said, he will open up the game for whoever the Vikings put at quarterback for the future very well. I think you can't deny he was incredible at Pitt. I thought he was amazing last year with Caleb Williams. If you get this guy on the open field, he's a menace. So I really like him. I think it goes in that same range. I think the Vikings, although he's the fourth straight wide receiver off the board, honestly, I think that's might have been who they would have gone with anyways. So I don't think you can be mad if you're a Vikings fan on this one.
And next up, the Giants trade up for the 24th pick. They just ended up trading a few seventh round picks, sixth and seventh round. So it's not like they really trade up that much, but it seems like they were trading up to block the Cowboys from what I've heard at this point. And they end up taking Deonte Banks. At first, I wasn't really sure how I felt about the pick, but putting him in Wink Martindale's system, he is the perfect fit for the Giants. And I have this as a low A pick. I could definitely see it being in that same area as Devon Witherspoon going to the Seahawks. I think both of the players fit very well. And I know there is a need at receiver, but I'm not mad the Giants go with a cornerback. And I know they didn't take Joey Porter, which I would have liked, but Deonte Banks is just as good with the options left.
Yeah, I mean, scheme fit wise, this is probably the best guy. I would put him right under Devin Witherspoon in the B tier. I'm a fan of Emmanuel Forbes, but I would have liked, as you said, to see Joey Porter go there. I'm a big Cam Smith guy. I know you like the Forbes pick more, which I don't blame you. I think Forbes fits a little bit better. But, this isn't necessarily a guy I expect to be a superstar day one. We're not going to see some Sauce Gardner, Tariq Woolen stuff necessarily. But longevity wise, I think it's a good selection. I think he's going to be a staple of the Giants secondary, as we see guys like Xavier McKinney, or how we saw guys like Bradbury until, stuff has changed recently. But guys that have, maybe not even Bradbury, you know what I'm saying? There's been some guys that have been Giants and have been solidified in the corner safety department. I'm kind of rambling on a little bit. I like Forbes. I like the fit with Wink. So I'd put him under Devin Witherspoon. I like the B tier for him.
So next up, we have the Bills trading up to get Dalton Kincaid. Originally, when I wrote this down, I had this as a C plus pick, but looking at it more, I might lean more towards the D area just because they traded up and got a player in a position that they don't need. I think Dalton Kincaid was the best tight end in this draft, but if you're the Bills and you're trading up to get a tight end when that position having Dawson Knox isn't a need at all, it's just a very head scratching decision for me.
Yeah, I didn't love it either. I agree with your analysis. I think that's a perfect way to put it. I had him at the lowest guy in the C tier, or, if you put him in the highest in the D tier, I respect that. I'm a fan of his. I think he's going to be good, but I think you can figure out tight end later in your, I don't know, like later years, even. I don't think this is a pressing need right now. So I'm with you on that. Same range.
Yeah, I just very interesting pick for them. Coming up next, we have the Cowboys going with Mazie Smith. I had this as a low A pick. I think the Cowboys kind of went away from that offensive area. I think they definitely would have gone with Kincaid. That's why the Bills traded up to get him, because I think we talked about this before. The Cowboys needed a tight end, and obviously they didn't like Michael Mayer as much in this position. But being able to go with a defensive lineman who I was very high on, I think this is a great pick for them, and he's going to fit into that system very well.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough discussion because I'm not as high on Mazi Smith. I like him. I think he's going to be good. I just don't necessarily think it was the best pick for the Cowboys in the position. I know you have to shore up the D line, but I think we just see edge rushers more and more valuable. I think you could have got a D line, an interior guy a little later in this draft. And I'm not a huge fan of Smith. I think he fits well enough where he's going to be good, but I don't necessarily. I look at guys like Darnell Wright, who we have here. I don't think he was a better pick than Darnell Wright to the Bears. So that puts me in a weird spot for him because we have him in that C tier. I could settle on a B tier. I know you have him in the A. I have him as a C. If you want to put him anywhere in the B tier, I won't be mad at it. I'm not sure if I could put an interior guy, the third best interior guy, that high, in my opinion. But it could go either way. I respect it.
Yeah, I have him in between Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, and between the three receivers in the
Yeah.
B tier. And next up, we have Anton Harrison going to the Jaguars. A bit of an interesting pick for me. I just didn't think that the Jaguars would end up trading back, but I do think it's a great pick overall, though. They get the best tackle that's available at this point. I think with Darnell Wright going so high, I would have thought that he would have gone more towards this area, but obviously the Bears liked him and they took him there, and the Jaguars needed a tackle and they took the best one available. And I think Anton Harrison is worth a first round pick. I know offensive linemen, they can get a bit shaky after you go past the first kind of surefire guys, but I think Anton Harrison is a very early second round to a late first round pick, and that's exactly where he got drafted.
Yeah, and all the same things you just said. I think he's solid on the outside of the line. He doesn't have a ton of versatility inside, but if you're the Jaguars, you don't need him to. You just need a guy that can block for Trevor Lawrence. So I have him in that B tier range. I think he's a good player. I think he went about where he should have went, and I think the Jaguars are happy to get him.
And next up, we have Myles Murphy going to the Bengals at, what is this, 28? I had this as a B tier pick. I think he's obviously a great player, one of the best in his position, and we just saw some defensive players come off the board too before this at his position, and I like the pick for the Bengals overall, and I don't really have that much to say about this pick.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of buzz about Murphy throughout the year. At one point, we thought he was going to be a top 10 sort of guy. Didn't have the best end to his career at Clemson, but he's very solid. He's versatile. I've said good things about him before, and I'll echo them again. I think he's strong. I think he'll translate well to the NFL. I think the Bengals maybe had some other pressing needs, but I think their needs, such as corner, there's not a lot of guys left at this point. So I think Myles Murphy was good value. I have him in that B range as well. I think he'll profile well. I'm excited to see what he does because there's a lot of talk on him.
I mean, at this pick, they need a corner. Joey Porter is still on the board, so
I know, but I mean, clearly,
it's interesting what's going on with him. I don't know what's the
clearly
issue
there's
is.
something we don't know at this point because I would have expected Joey Porter to be in that 15-ish range. But
Yeah.
I think even if there isn't an issue, I think if the Bengals see a guy like Porter who's clearly slipping down the board, then you get nervous. You might wonder what other teams don't like about him. So I think just to play it safe and maybe not stress out if you're them. I understand the Miles Murphy pick. I think it's a classic B. It's not bad.
Yeah, and then the Saints with a pretty similar pick for me. I think Brian Brzee. I had this a little higher than Miles Murphy. I think it's a just a better fit for them than Miles Murphy to the Bengals, but still in that B area. I just have it a little higher up.
Yeah, Brzee is interesting because he could genuinely be like a guy that's more towards the top of the A tier or a guy that's in the D tier. I think just based off the pick and the value, I got to put him in the B tier around where you had him. But I mean, he showed flashes of being like star D lineman in the NFL stuff. And then, he has some personal issues. He has like minor injury tweaks. And we see him like as a guy that really shouldn't even be first round. So I think this is a fair spot to take him. I like that New Orleans was able to get him. I think that's a good fit. But we'll see. I think B tier is fair.
And next up, we have Nolan Smith going 30th to the Eagles. And for me personally, this might be different. I have him as an A plus pick. I had him as a top 10-ish, top 15 definitely player in this draft. I had him as the second best edge rusher in this draft. And I think when we look back, he'll be one of the best players in this draft period. And to be able to get him at 30 for the Eagles is an absolute steal. I have him as the lowest. I think he's lower than Christian Gonzalez and Jalen Carter, but in that A plus tier. But I think this is an absolute steal for the Eagles. And either way, if it's not an A plus tier draft for him specifically, Nolan Smith, the Eagles had the best draft, bar none.
Oh, by far. And there's always a pick every year that kind of just feels like a steal. We kind of everyone kind of knows like this guy could show out and be one of the best at his position. And this is it for me. I think we're a lot closer than you think. I had him high A tier. I just think he's incredible. I mean, he's athletic. He was a part of that Georgia defense that was probably the best of all time. You're worried about his injuries, but the good part is he's not injured anymore. So we're just looking at the prospect. We're looking at the talent. They get Jalen Carter reunited with his guy Nolan Smith. I think they're building an incredible D line over there. I'd let you put him wherever you want in this range. I had him at like A tier, like around Bryce Young.
Okay. I would argue I would put him right behind Christian Gonzalez. I think at 30, I just think it's an absolute steal for them.
No, you're a big Georgia fan. I'm gonna let you roll with that. It seems like a bit of a hot take, but I'm with you on it. So why not go all the way?
And for the last pick in the first round, we have the defending champion Chiefs taking Felix and Duke Uzama, something around that range. I had this as a C minus pick. I know it's a luxury pick, so that's kind of why I leaned off of the D area, but I think there was better guys at his position available and just better guys overall in this draft available for the Chiefs' needs. And I'm not a huge fan of his just overall gameplay style wise, but for the Chiefs, they're not putting too much stock into the pick. That's why I didn't really have it as a D tier pick.
Yeah, it's in that C range for me. I like guys like Keon White and BJ Ojulari a little more here. I would have maybe vouched for them a little bit, but I think Felix fits the Chiefs' defensive scheme a little more. But I mean, I'm with you on it. It's kind of a luxury pick. I don't want to call it a nothing pick, but I mean, they did the same thing with Karlaftis last year. It's just kind of what the Chiefs do. If they have a late first round pick, they'll take an edge rusher and hope he blossoms. And, Ozama could, but I think Z tier is about right for him.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. We have 3 A plus picks in this draft. Jalen Carter at 9 to the Eagles, Christian Gonzalez at 17 to the Patriots, and Nolan Smith to the Eagles at 30. So obviously the Eagles having an absolutely amazing draft, mimicking last year's draft, taking a Georgia defensive tackle with Jordan Davis and then a edge rusher with Nakobe Dean later in the third round. And they're just building that whole entire Georgia defense, which as a Georgia and Giants fan, it's bittersweet to see, but I love to see the guys get drafted. I wish it was anywhere else. In the A tier, we have guys like Bryce Young, Will Anderson, Zay Flowers, Paris Johnson, Peter Skoronski, Kalijah Cansey, Tyree Wilson, both of these guys. And the majority of our picks are in the B tier. I think there was a lot of teams that had good picks, and some of these players will probably be a lot better than a B tier pick, but sometimes teams just take players where we don't really know what's going to happen with them. And a B tier pick isn't bad at all. I think C is average. So having a B pick is still very good. And speaking of the C picks, we have a few here, being Darnell Wright, Emmanuel Forbes, Lucas Van Ness, and Bijan Robinson, which is a little different than the other three. But basically, the C tier is guys where there's probably better at their position available, but the team liked him. And then we have the D tier picks with Dalton Kincaid, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Will McDonald, guys that probably shouldn't have gone in the first round, or in Jahmyr Gibbs' case, gone as high as he did. And then Jack Campbell as an F. I think the worst pick in this draft by far. I think he could have been a day two guy, arguably even in the third round for me.
Yeah. And I just want to point out, we're not necessarily ranking these guys on how good we think they are or how much they'll perform. I think we could see a guy, for example, like Dalton Kincaid or especially Bijan Robinson that go out there and stars. These are guys that could be with rookie of the year conversations, but we're breaking down the value that they were at their pick. And I think we did a pretty good job. I think, you saw me and Manning agree more than ever. We weren't going on here and fighting. It's just, we're not the experts always, but we're definitely going to voice our opinions. And, some teams walked out of here with incredible value. I mean, Philly and Houston are the first ones to come to mind. But, for a team like the Lions, I have faith that they'll figure it out, but it doesn't seem like they were on the same page with a lot of the other experts in this one.
Yeah, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens with these players. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button, and we probably at some point will come out here, maybe sometime, I don't know if it'll be directly after the draft, but we'll have some more talk about the draft just overall with some of these players, and specifically some of the second and third round picks. Even the fourth and fifth round, we'll probably see a guy end up falling. So we'll be able to talk about that in a little bit, and just some overall team grades. So with that being said, see you guys in the next video.
See you.